Welcome to the May Public Works Committee meeting. I call this meeting to order and welcome our committee members. Councilmember Barbara Haynes-Burke, Vice Chair, Councilmember John Larson, Councilmember Annette Scipio, and myself, Jeff McIntosh. On tonight's agenda, we have 3 consent items and 3 general agenda items, all of which are for information only. Committee members or council members, do I have anybody who have anything that we want to pull off the consent agenda for discussion? All right, hearing none, could I get a motion to approve?
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
We have a motion and a second. Please lock in your vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. City Clerk, can we have item G1, please?
Item G1, update on high priority drainage projects within the public right-of-way.
And who would, Mr. Huff will be presenting this. Thank you, sir.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Been a minute since been up here, so quite a lot of changes, but good to see everybody. This is an information item on the update of drainage infrastructure throughout the city. And basically, we are going to provide a quick overview, a lot of review for this committee, as you've all seen many of these items before. Kind of overview of drainage maintenance, what types of drainage issues we're seeing across the community, then go into some interdepartmental efforts versus the capital project timeline, what it would take to implement a capital project with external forces, and then kind of take a brief visit to some of those high priority drainage projects. So in general, what is drainage maintenance across the city? Basically, we own, operate, and maintain all of the catch basins, pipes, structures within our public right-of-way and on city-owned property. And what this equates to is over 22,000 inventoried structures and conveyances. So a large, large inventory of infrastructure that we maintain. Basically, we upgrade, we repair it as need be. And this includes the stormwater detention and retention devices on city property as well. Other programs that we have are our 70/30 private property drainage assistance policy, and then street sweeping that's taken care of in our sanitation department. So in recent years, we've seen a lot of uptick in these high intensity storms that has caused flooding and erosion across our community. And these drainage systems that were installed decades ago in the 40s, 50s, and 60s have now exceeded their hydraulic lifetime. And you're seeing things like this upper right-hand slide photo where you're seeing large holes in our streets, caved-in shoulders, thoroughfares that are not passable because the drainage systems underneath them have deteriorated to the point where they're just collapsing. At this point, we have over 30 major repair projects across the city, and new projects are added regularly. Matter of fact, since I did this presentation, we have new projects. So constantly evolving, constantly changing. And that capital projects list is now eclipsing $30 million and growing, and with a 20-year time span for completion. And to note, this does not include bridges. This is pipes, culverts, infrastructure pieces of a drainage nature. So staff respond to, on average, over 500 calls per year, and they can vary from the occasional block catch basin that you send a vac truck out to deal with in a couple minutes to a multi-block drainage failure. So they cross the spectrum. Our smaller repairs are taken care of by our in-house crews, but these larger projects, we need help from contracted engineers and construction companies. So a little bit about the capital project time frame. A lot of our citizens like a quick turnaround on these projects and think, you know, that the city should be able to move quickly. So I want to give some perspective here on the capital project timeline. So this all starts with selecting a consultant, an engineer, to help us out with design. That RFQ, or request for qualification statements, it could last from 3 to 6 months to get to a point where you've selected a consultant. After that, you're negotiating scope and fee with that selected consultant and then proceeding toward project execution or contract execution in that phase. So on that juncture, we've got a consultant on board. Then we put them forward with design, permitting, land acquisition. Depending on the size of the project, that could take 6 to 12 months and the complexity. Then you move to construction bidding once you've got the design, the permitting, and the bid documents in place. So another 3 months there. And then it culminates to construction, which could last anywhere from 3 to 12 months depending on the size of the project. So all this totals to a fairly large amount of time from the citizen's perspective as it goes from paper to actually boots on the ground doing the work. So just to add some perspective on what these capital projects take to get into the ground. So moving on to some of our higher priority drainage projects. The first one here is Hawthorne Road. It's located in the southwest ward, and it is probably about 150 feet south of the intersection of Hawthorne and First Street. Sinsenberger, that area. This is the old Hawthorne curb before the highway was put in place, which is a 20 by 20 box culvert. That culvert is now settling. You see from the photos, the top picture is the southwest corner, which is now the culvert, as it shifts and moves, is creating a sinkhole in the sidewalk. And just below it is the water line that's encased in ductile iron, and you can see how that infrastructure is pinching as this culvert moves. So obviously we have to replace it. Estimated replacement cost is $3 million. And as far as progress on this, we have an emergency contract in place with a engineering firm, and we are going through alternatives analysis on how to replace this culvert while keeping at least one travel lane of the road in place because of its proximity to Baptist Hospital. But at the end of the day, the full culvert will be replaced. Yes, Councilmember?
Am I seeing that lower picture correct? Is the pipe separating?
Yes, ma'am. You are seeing that correctly. That is a water line where the bell and spigot of that ductile has basically started to pinch. And that's a piece of infrastructure that we'll need to address when we replace the culvert. And unfortunately, this area is riddled with infrastructure, so it's less than a straight line. So very challenging project here. Next, moving forward, this is Devonshire Road. It is off of Thomasville Road in the southeast ward. Basically here you have an aged 48-inch corrugated metal pipe where the bottom's rusted out, and you will see this theme repeatedly as we go forward. Metal pipes, as they age, they corrode, they rust out, and basically this is a full replacement of that 48-inch system there. Estimated replacement cost is $350,000, and right now we have had in-house crews make a temporary repair to get the road open, and then this will be designed ultimately and then bid with a contracted force, an external force. Next one is Lynn Haven Road. It's in the West Ward. Again, a corrugated metal pipe, failed system here where the invert's rusted out. This is 470 feet, give or take, of metal pipe in the middle of the road. It crosses all the water lines and sewer lines in the neighborhood. And at this point, we have CCTV'd the pipe, determined the need for full replacement, and this will be a design and replaced by exterior forces as well. Autumn Mist is in the Hillcrest Town Center development in the southwest ward. This is a damaged concrete pipe and a junction box that has basically resulted in a sinkhole in the road. Smaller project here. We have CCTV'd this line, and we've had our drainage forces out here as of late. We've discovered the issue, replaced a segment of pipe, and repaired the box, and we are currently backfilling this. So this is one I'm happy to say we will be able to handle this one with in-house forces, and will probably need no exterior help from consultants or contractors. Maplewood, basically another metal pipe in the southwest ward. This is off of Knollwood Street. This is two 54-inch metal pipes that corroded, caved in, and needs full replacement. $700,000 approximate replacement cost. We have an emergency contract in place with Louder, have delivered them a design, and have a contract with Louder to actually mobilize when they get all of the materials in place, which is expected to be June. So hopefully we will get this one open to traffic late summer, early fall of this year. Aubry Court, Northwest Ward, this is off of Yadkinville. This actually is a road that separates two impoundments where the system, the 24-inch pipe system, had become decayed, fell in, and took the head wall with it. Basically, the work here is to replace the pipes and the head wall. Estimated cost $300,000, and this is one that in-house crews are working to replace the pipe, and we are going to try to do the head wall work as well. Patterson Avenue, this has been on the books for a while, Northeast Ward. This is a failure of a 72-inch corrugated metal pipe. We are under emergency contract for that. Estimated repair cost, $1.5 million, and we have a contractor on board with that. This is one where material or lack thereof is costing us time, where our supplier cannot get the steel to create the reinforced concrete culverts that we need to put in the road. So we are in a hurry up and wait mode here, just waiting for the steel to create the pipe to be able to put it in the ground. So it's a situation that numerous contractors and we, the city, are feeling with material shortages.
Why does that one cost so much more money? It's like over
Councilmember
me.
Scipio, this is one that's very deep and very complex. This one is just up from the Beatty Center, and it has a lot of infrastructure rolling over the top of it. It's got fiber, gas, every utility you can think of overriding this metal culvert. So
It's also a 6-foot pipe.
yeah, it's a very large diameter pipe, large trench, and it's got to have new head walls, the concrete on the upstream and downstream side.
You say it's up from,
It's just north of the Beatty Center area.
so it's going towards Liberty Street?
It is at the intersection of Patterson and Northwest.
Oh, so it's down, okay.
Yeah, north
Okay.
as far as directional. Apologize for that.
Thank you.
So Underwood, north area, again, a large-scale concrete box culvert. It's failing. This one is actually not a full replacement. This is a retrofit where we're working with a structural engineer to pour a new invert in the bottom of the culvert and repair the walls instead of totally replacing it. So that's why you see the reduced cost on this one at $500,000. But have obviously a contract with a consultant to do this work and proceeding through design as we speak. So I know I quickly went through those in the interest of time, but happy to entertain any questions.
Mr. Huff, thank you for your typical good work and very illustrative. Do we have questions? Yes, Councilmember Scipio.
I always love these information sessions because it gives me insight into what really goes on in the city that we don't always think about.
Public Works Committee, keeping it real.
It's really wonderful. I have several questions. First of all, how large is your staff that does all of these in-house repairs?
It used to be a whole lot larger Councilmember Scipio, right now, we have one in-house drainage crew that consists of a foreman, a heavy equipment operator, 3 mediums, and 3 lights. It used to be 3 in-house drainage crews, but due to staff attrition, we're running or have filled an occupied position, 1 drainage crew right now.
Are those, the 2 crews that we don't have, are they in our current budget to be filled, to be?
Oh, yeah, they're just vacant positions.
They're just vacant positions.
Yeah, that we're trying to fill and trying to encourage anybody to come and work with us.
Thank you. The other question is, this may just sound crazy, but do we know where all of our pipes are and the materials that they're made from, or do we discover it when something fails?
We know where 22,000 of them are, but that is not all of them right now. We're constantly adding inventory. When we accept a new street over for city maintenance, we're adding those pipes and those pieces of infrastructure into our inventory. But that's only within the public right-of-way. Anything on the private side, we don't know the answers to those questions because we don't own, operate, and maintain it.
Thank you. And so the final question I have is, there's a lot of federal infrastructure dollars that supposedly out there. Are we actively trying to seek any of those grants, even though they may be competitive, or that could help us with all of this? Because if we've got all that piping, it might be a good proposal to say that we need to be able to replace them, almost all of them, because I'm sure all of them are old and they're deteriorating.
Yes, ma'am. So yes, we are. We're working with Leslie Mazingo and her folks, and we're actually sitting in on DEQ's information sessions as well. So yes, we will take any kind of grant funding we can to advance our infrastructure situation. Yes, ma'am.
We're also directly lobbying members of Congress to try to get some earmarks as well.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
your team for all they do, too.
Yes, ma'am.
Because they get the brunt of complaints when something fails and we have to close a street or a bridge and nobody wants to detour, and we have to tell them, well, it's going to take a year or 2 years, or we don't have the money. It may be closed forever. But thank your staff for all that they do.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Larson.
Kind of curious about how you define a culvert versus a bridge. I noticed one of your box culverts looked almost like a bridge to me.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilmember Larson. I define a bridge as decking, superstructure, bents or piers versus a tube or a box that conveys the water.
Okay. It looks like we got a lot of backlog need here, both in our staffing requirements and in the funding of actual outside contracting services. If we don't get federal grants, where's this money coming from? Lee?
Yeah.
Good evening, Chairman McIntosh, members of the Public Works Committee. Councilmember Larson, you will see in the proposed budget that will come out here in a few weeks, significant amount of money proposed for maintenance using our capacity of LOBs, limited obligation bonds, for a lot of maintenance projects, a lot of which are bridges and some of these projects. In addition, we have been working with our finance staff to do an updated pro forma on the stormwater fund, where most of these projects are charged to, so that we can. And you'll see in the budget that we're gonna plan for all these projects to be done. Whether they can get done in that amount of time is doubtful, but we're gonna plan for that. By the fall, we'll be coming back to you with an updated pro forma on the stormwater fund. The reality is we'll be coming back at some point and recommending an increase in the stormwater fee, because that's how we fund these. But we have some funds right now available. Our biggest issue is contractors and staff, but we will need, once these projects get spent and there are a lot more out there long-term, we're going to need more revenue.
It seems like every time we meet, we talk about maintenance needs in parks and rec, we talk about maintenance needs on the roads, we talk about bridges, we talk about infrastructure on water, stormwater systems, and it just brings to mind, I think, what Councilmember McIntosh has brought up on other occasions, is that maintenance has got to be a priority for this board. I mean, we just can't keep deferring the cost. We're going to get so far behind that we're going to have these potholes, these sinkholes, and these deteriorating structures that we know are a real problem in the future. And I just want to emphasize my support for maintenance programs. It's not the most glorious things, but if they go wrong, boy, we sure know it, don't we? And that's when people start complaining about it. So we've got to get ahead of this curve, and I'm all for that.
Any other questions?
Good evening, Mr. Huff. Thank you for this alarming presentation. I see that we have over 30 major repairs, and the list is continuing to grow. And am I understanding this correctly? Based on what we do have, it will take over 20 years to complete?
Based on our current funding level, resources, and what Mr. Garrity was speaking of earlier, the level of funding in our stormwater utility, that is the estimated time frame for completion of these.
Okay. Well, we will definitely have to do something to fast track this, and finding funding, if it's infrastructure money, LOBS money, we will have to do something, and maybe even consider contracting some outside help in order to get these jobs done. So again, thank you for this presentation. It is alarming. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's why we have Mr. Huff here, is to scare the bejesus out of us. Keith, we've used design build in many of our projects. Do we enter into those type of agreements when we were working on stormwater projects?
We haven't got into the foray of design build with that, because it's stormwater historically has kind of been a pay-go, and it's been a project-by-project thing, because we've not issued too much debt for stormwater. We pick a project, we move forward, we deal with it. But with the amount of projects that we have now, I think it's time where we've crossed that precipice where we probably need to look at a design build or construction manager at risk, some kind of innovative program to assist with the backlog. So,
well, and financing needs to be creative. We can't just dump all this onto our water and sewer bill and put it in people's mailboxes every month. So either using LOBs or geo bonds, or I know the Utility Commission issues their own bonds. I don't think we have that ability to do that within our stormwater program.
We have issued debt under the stormwater utility before. It was 15 years ago, give or take.
Yes.
Well, as you well know, the longer we let things go, the more expensive they become. So the quicker we can get on this, the better off we'll be. One of the things I like about bringing these type of subjects up in front of council is that when we get that call from people about a project and they want it done now, these type of presentations really help us not defend ourselves, but to give people logical reasons why their bridge or their pothole isn't going to get fixed tomorrow. It's awfully hard to tell people no, but that comes with the job. So I appreciate the comments from council here, and I think we have a good understanding of how we respond to the public's demands on this process. Okay, anything else on this subject? Keith, once again, thank you for excellent work.
Yes, sir, my pleasure.
Okay. City Clerk, we have item number 2, please.
Item G2, Winston Weaver Fire Environmental Update.
And who will be presenting this? Lucky guy. Mr. Huff.
Shouldn't have sat down there.
And I just want to say again, what we've talked about in the past, this is going to be this committee is going to take a thorough look at solutions that we can implement. And in order to do that, we need to have some background on what has occurred and what current status is.
Absolutely. So again, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I kind of got engrossed with Aaron's note there. I apologize if I didn't enunciate. I wasn't too or was too far from the microphone. So I will speak up this time or get it closer to me. So yes, this is an information item, I guess a continuation of the committee's updates on the Weaver fire. This happens to be an environmental perspective. So just kind of there will be a lot of overview for this group on this one as well, based on your exposure to the Weaver fire. But on this one, we're going to focus on the impacts to air quality, focus on the impacts to water quality, and then from an environmental standpoint, give the committee a briefing on what's going on currently with the satellite facility on Brownsboro Road, and then the parent site at Cherry Street. So just a little brief overview or repeat of the timeline. So obviously our first call came Monday evening, January 31st in the 6:45, 7 o'clock range, reporting of the fire. Then as we progressed to 9 p.m., we started talking about evacuation of the 6,500 residents in the area of the Weaver site. That following morning, EPA, an 8-member EPA emergency response team came to Winston-Salem and immediately started setting up air and water monitoring locations to start collecting data. The local, state, and county regulatory groups started meeting to coordinate with EPA, share resources, and start getting boots on the ground to these areas, the stream sites, the air quality monitoring sites, as fire suppression activities continued through February 2nd. And the Forsyth County Environmental Assistance Program sent out daily media releases on air, exercising precautionary measures, et cetera, as we go through those initial days after the fire started. So just a quick recap of that. So as we all know, the Weaver site had a healthy list of fertilizers.
Healthy?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Large quantities of fertilizers and fertilizer-related products for their production area. And we knew that they were capping for the spring season, so they were at their max. You've all seen these lists of fertilizer components before, starting with the ammonium nitrate and going all the way down to the urea and zinc that they use to mix all the fertilizer batches. So when the fire started, there were some existing sites from an air quality perspective that Forsyth County had set up. You can see the yellow diamonds and the magenta diamonds. Basically, EPA and the county supplemented sites to get a more robust network of air monitoring around the Weaver plant site so they could start monitoring data or obtaining data. So this is an EPA threshold level for particulate matter. It's basically their measure of how healthy the air is. It's measured in micrograms per meter cubed. And I want to draw your attention to the bottom line, hazardous section there, where basically in an 8-hour average, anything over 300 micrograms per meter cubed is considered hazardous. So that 300 level there, we'll use that as our benchmark or reference points for hazardous. So this is from the Forsyth County. This is their cone of influence as far as what is hazardous and what is not. That cone of influence extends almost down to Country Club Road the first 24 hours and change after the fire. And because we had the wind prevailing in that direction, that's where the bulk of the pollutants and the hazardous conditions maintain itself. So going back to that 300 micrograms per meter cubed, when they first started testing, they had peak 24-hour levels in the 9,300 range and averages in the 1,800 range. So we are well above hazardous conditions for air quality until we extend into the Wednesday evening to Thursday timeframe with the fire. And once it was contained and all the hot spots were suppressed, you can see that that trend line basically decreased rapidly. And once we get toward Friday and the weekend, we return to fairly reasonable air quality standards. So we'll characterize it here. Basically, Monday night through Wednesday evening, we had hazardous conditions as far as air quality in that cone of influence. Basically, from Wednesday morning through Friday, it improved to unhealthy. And then as we got to Friday morning into the weekend, we returned to good. So initially, very bad air quality, but it was very short-lived in the scheme of things. So moving on to water quality. Over the course of the fire, basically 4.2 million gallons of fire suppression water was used to extinguish the fire and the hot spots that ensued afterward. So in that fire suppression water, you had nitrogen, phosphorus, that lovely, healthy mix of chemicals that we saw at the initial slide go into our creeks. The main creek that it went into was Monarchus Creek. That basically goes down Brownsboro Road, crosses Bethabara, goes through Loman's Plaza, on out to Muddy Creek where it exits our city. So with the influx of chemicals here, we did have a substantial fish kill in Monarchus and Mill Creeks. And basically, as a result, we all, state, local, and county, started sampling the creeks to determine the impacts. This is a slide of the parent site is the star, and then the various blue dots are sampling points as we go down Monarchus Creek toward Mill Creek and then out of town. And similar to the air quality data, the water quality data was orders of magnitude higher than anything we've ever seen with any other spill in the city. Chatham Road fire, et cetera, et cetera. You have ammonia nitrogen in the 3,720 milligrams per liter threshold. We have not seen that in any of our illicit discharges, fires, et cetera, in this city. And those concentrations remained elevated all the way down through Loman's Plaza in Mill Creek.
Wow.
So extremely high concentrations of nutrients in that runoff. So the regulatory groups consulted with the state toxicologists. They looked at the data and determined that a water advisory was in order because of the levels of nutrients, because if you had a dog, a child that were playing in the water, it would obviously adversely affect them. So basically, the regulatory groups took it upon themselves to post this advisory everywhere along Monarchus and Mill Creek that we had public access capability. We posted signs. And it was posted in English and Spanish, and it stayed up approximately 2 weeks after the initial posting. So on to the sites and what's kind of going on with them. This photo here is of the Brownsboro Auxiliary Storage Site. They stored various types of raw materials there. You're talking about 50, 75,000 cubic yards on occasion that could be stored at this site. And we found this through our water quality sampling, where basically upstream of the discharge point of the parent site, we were getting high concentrations as well. So this led us to the Brownsboro site. We found that raw product was discharging into the storm drain system, and That ultimately led to the city levying a notice of violation to Weaver Fertilizer, Inc., where basically on February 5th, we cited them, we gave them a notice of violation and immediate corrective actions to address the fertilizer and raw products that were getting into our storm drain system. To date, they've removed 21,390 gallons of liquid and 16.2 tons of sludge, which was just emulsified raw product from the site. So they've made considerable progress there. Moving on to the Weaver site, basically to address runoff and continuous pollutant loading into our surface waters, they created a 900,000 gallon containment berm, and they pumped the contaminated water into what we call frac tanks. It's a big 20,000 gallon cell, which they're then testing and then hauling off to local dairy farmers, fertilizer needing entities that can take that water and land apply it. So that was the main thing that the parent site was doing to mitigate the issues of consistent nutrient influx into our surface waters. Some ongoing things that they're doing now that the plant is decommissioned and all the concrete's removed and they have bare soil. They have done some testing on the site that revealed that they have residuals in the soil. There's some salts and metals and other hazardous materials that they need to address. So Weaver has requested permission to scrape the top 6 to 12 inches from the site. They've requested an erosion control or grading permit to do so, and that's to have all of these residuals removed and disposed of properly so it won't continue to infiltrate into our surface waters after that berm is removed. So that's an ongoing activity that they're undertaking. So next steps, we're going to continue to monitor them. We're continuing to monitor the streams to make sure that those pollutant loads are reducing over time and the activities that they're taking on the parent site are actually mitigating the damages and the pollutants that we're seeing. The state is involved from the inactive hazardous sites branch, where they're requiring water quality testing of the groundwater and the soils on a regular basis, so enhanced testing on their part. And basically, those results will determine the next phase of where Weaver's directed. And they continue to haul these raw products, the frac tanks and the soil off the site. So we are far from the conclusion and closure of their site as it exists right now. And staff has asked them to advise us if they are requesting, have any inclination to rebuild anything on that site, and we do not have an answer to that yet. So they have not gone on record officially yet on their intention for the parent site. So that's kind of the state of the union on the environmental side. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Keith, thanks again for an excellent report. Have I got questions from council members? Councilmember Scipio.
When the creeks became polluted and they went to the Yadkin, did we monitor the Yadkin water? And or I know that our water system, our drinking water, comes from the Yadkin. Mm-hmm. Were there any precautions or special treatment of water at our plants, our water plants that provide drinking water?
Excellent question. Our intake for our water supply is probably 12 miles upstream of where this pollutant load got into the Yadkin. Councilmember Scipio, to answer your question, the Yadkin was monitored, but once it got that low in the watershed out of our community in Davidson County, the concentrations were not as distinct as what we saw on Monarchus and Mill Creek. So it never posed, the fire never posed a danger to our drinking water supply. And even as low as the Yadkin, where it discharged from Muddy Creek into the Yadkin, it wasn't a large contamination source as far as fish kill and whatnot. Was it something that we wanted? No, obviously not. But it wasn't at the level of danger that Monarchus and Mill was as far as the concentrations in those streams.
You also said they made a request to remove the affected soil that they found is still contaminated. Who did they make that request to?
So basically, they are making that request to the state of North Carolina for permission to remove the soil and remediate it properly. And they are asking the city to provide them with a grading permit. So they've got to provide erosion control measures while they're taking that soil off. So state for permission to do it, us for the grading permit to approve the measures and stuff for the erosion control side.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Mr. Larson.
Sort of a question about when in the midst of fighting this fire and the tons of water that are being thrown on that site at the time, there must have been some knowledge that there would be runoff as a result of that. Is there any standard operating procedure as far as containing that sort of toxic waste before it gets into the creek?
Standard operating procedure from an environmental standpoint, no, sir, not to my knowledge. It was an emergency response first and a monitoring activity on the environmental side.
I know when we have truck spills and things like that on the highway, there are coconut barricades and whatever that are put in place to contain the spill.
Yeah. For this, it took them a couple weeks to construct that. Probably not a couple weeks. It took them a week and a half to construct that 900,000 gallon containment berm. So that was something that they had to bring in material, they had to grade it out, and literally it was along the perimeter of the plant. So it took them a substantial amount of time.
What's going into that? Water runoff? Is that rainwater runoff?
So it's rainwater from the plant. It is decommissioning or was decommissioning activities from the plant itself when the bag houses were removed, everything like that. If it ran off, it ran into that containment berm.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Burke.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Huff, again. The notice of violation that the city gave to the Weaver plant on February 5th to clean up the contamination, I noticed that they have removed 21,390 gallons of liquid and 16.20 tons of sludge. So how much more do they still need to remove? And I noticed when I read the letter, there's not a date, a timeline telling them when all of this has to be done.
That was the second page. So I didn't want to overburden the committee with too much narrative there, but wanted to give you the title page for that. So the subsequent page had the time frame, where it needs to go, cradle to grave, so to speak, from when it's removed to the plant to where it's held at the Weaver site to where it's environmentally and sensitively disposed. I'm happy to say that they have disposed of all of those things, the sludge and the materials properly. They have taken all the material and removed it from exposure to rainfall, and their ultimate goal is to decommission the Brownsboro site altogether. So they have complied with our notice of violation at this point.
Will we receive that second page of the letter?
If you would like, I can send you the whole thing.
Thank you.
It has photos, it has all the documentation. Happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, a couple of questions for you, Keith. I know that when this event happened, we were all rightfully very proud of how we responded. All of our departments, I think, did a great job. It was really a Herculean effort. I'd be interested to see if we will get any feedback from all the agencies that were on site and came and monitored. It would be nice to ask them, how do you think we did? I mean, I think I know the answer, but it would be good to hear, even if it's just a pat on the back saying you did a good job, which I hope it is, and I think it probably will be, but it'd be interesting to see how we performed in their eyes. EPA, all the alphabet soup of agencies. I don't think this is a question for you, but maybe to Mr. King's. Can we take a look at or have somebody tell us what they feel like the effects on the future health effects might be on people? Again, it's not a water quality thing, but it is something that I think the public would like to hear.
Yeah, that's something, Councilmember McIntosh, that came up. Mayor Pro Tem held 2 community meetings, and that was a theme that was reiterated at both of those meetings. I'm not sure, I'd look at Lee a little bit on that one. I'm not sure the proper entity to kind of dive into that, but it's certainly something that came up, and it's probably something that warrants some additional discussion.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so get some.
We're not done after this meeting talking about the fire, so that's something we can bring back. That'd be great. And then having some look at what the health of the streams are now, long-term effects on streams and rivers.
Yeah, we'll be monitoring those segments for months to come. We have background information on the pollutant concentrations, and we're looking to have those streams return to what we call baseline.
Do we know if there were any fish kills in the Yadkin?
No fish kills in the Yadkin, only on Monarchus Creek and Mill Creek.
Great, great. Now, so is that site basically going to be a Chernobyl? No one will be able to inhabit it forever and ever, amen? Or is their charge to get it back to the point where somebody could actually build something on that
Yeah,
site?
the hope is when they get all of the pollutant source, which we hope is in the top 12 inches of the soil, and there's no groundwater pollution or anything like that, yeah, the site would be ripe for development for a suitable site. So
Hard to imagine anybody would build housing there. Okay, great. Councilmember Scipio.
I'm not sure where Monarchus Creek is.
yes, ma'am. So if you start at Brownsboro Road and Cherry Street,
Okay.
and head down Brownsboro toward University. Basically, it parallels Brownsboro, then parallels basically northwest, excuse me, not northwest, but goes to Bethabara Road, goes under Bethabara Road through historic Bethabara, where it intersects with Mill Creek. And then Mill Creek is basically going to Lowman's Plaza, Yadkinville Road, out to the west.
Are both of those mostly underground or in?
There are significant sections of that are above ground. Matter of fact, only below ground is at road crossings. So,
Now, on that picture on water quality impacts, that was a very large fish showing, and that was in one of those creeks?
yes, ma'am, that was at the intersection of Monarchus and Mill Creek.
That's a very big fish. It's been there for a while. Do we have a sense of the cost of this event to the city? Have we tried to pull all of the costs together of what the fire suppression efforts were, having emergency management and the relocation of the whole cost that we've incurred as a city?
I have not totally.
We can get some of that information. The direct fire costs were primarily staffing because and some hose and equipment they lost. But we'll get you some information on the total because a lot of it was staffing and backfilling the staffing for the overtime and all the time it took for all the different city departments to staff that site for a long time.
For a long time, but that's the kind of thing people probably need to know, the cost of the service that we provide when we have an event like this. It's just not, we just do a good job. There is a cost that impacts our budget, so it'd be good to know that. And I think it's also, I love this report. One of the things I think is also important is to document how different agencies came together to get to where we are today, and the roles that they played. EPA, the state had various environmental people and the experts that were essential for us to get to some of these test studies. I think it's fascinating that we had so many monitors out there for water and air quality. I just didn't know, everybody may not know that that's how sophisticated we are and what a great the assets we have in our city and in our state. So I think we need to celebrate sometimes when we do a good job and identify all of the components that made it happen.
Keith, the question regarding the off-site storage facility, that runs down that street into a manhole into the creek, but it's also, there's quite a concentration of residential property around there. Do we have any way to scope what the impacts of that were over time prior to us discovering it? Because I know, I'm assuming we never inspected that site. I know you came to me afterwards and said, I'm getting ready to write these guys up because we just found this out. Maybe that's a question for who we bring in to talk to us about health. Are there any impacts possible from having been exposed to that runoff over however many years the storage facility has been there? So it's probably not a question for you.
As far as health impacts, I'm not aware of any, because basically it was raw product that was going directly to the catch basin or manhole and directly into the creek. So luckily for us, the creek was kind of shrouded and not directly accessible at the point of discharge. But don't know of anybody who had playgrounds, children direct access to that kind of thing. But
And again, we'll ask a medical person about this, but so what I'm hearing you say, though, is that unless you are physically exposed to the water, then there's probably not a health concern from that aspect of it.
Correct. And talking with the state toxicologist, that's where the information is coming from. The background samples that you show, or we show on that slide there, the up gradient, those weren't alarmingly high. From a water quality standpoint, is it something we want in this community? No, but it's not like the blue baby disease and stuff that you hear with high concentration of nitrogen exposed to a person of young age, that the downstream portion, the first couple of days of discharge, had those concentrations, and that's why the state toxicologist chose to post the streams there.
One last question. Has that site been completely cleared, the Brownsboro Road site?
Brownsboro, there's some residual raw product, but it is backed up under roof. It is not exposed to the rainfall.
So we are not requiring them to remove that?
No, but they are removing it because their ultimate intent is to decommission that particular site. They will not use that one anymore.
Do we have any idea of a time frame?
No, it's just a matter of how quickly they can get the material out to these select few sites that are receiving them. There's a dairy farmer here that can take a couple of loads of product here. They're just moving it out as they find homes for us.
We will continue to encourage them to keep getting rid of that stuff.
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay. Well, once again, thank you. It was a very thorough report, and appreciate the hard work from not just from you, but from all of our staff. So,
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay. If the clerk would read item G3, please.
Item G3, update to the architectural lighting policy for lighting displays within the public right-of-way.
Mr. Fansler is going to present. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It is great to be back in front of you. So I'll take just a few minutes of your time to give you a brief update on our architectural lighting policy, and just to remind you what it is, and then kind of a few updates that are on the docket for discussion. So again, this is an information item, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end should you have those. So basically, this policy update is three main objectives, okay? Basically, it reestablishes the request procedure, which establishes the protocol, basically, for requesting architectural lighting. And let me back up real briefly. Architectural lighting, the city owns and maintains three distinct architectural lighting infrastructure pieces, those being the art structures over US 52, and then of course, the brand new pedestrian bridges over the Parkway, Green Street, and the Strollway Bridge. And those are the three that we'll basically talk about this evening. Secondly, it adds a procedure which requires a presentation of a calendar of events, basically identifying what the city is going to be issuing for the architectural colors or events that we are going to endorse throughout the calendar year. That is something since this policy was adopted back in 2018, we have not formalized a calendar of events that basically says recurring events. We will be presenting these each year without a formal process or having to go through an approval again each year. So we've been doing these case by case for the past several years. This process would essentially establish a calendar where we wouldn't have to keep having the same approvals. And lastly, it grants the authority of the mayor to approve the requests for color changes which overlap. So what does that mean? For example, not every event that we approve has a set date. Let's say, for example, Winston-Salem State Homecoming. That game may be one weekend earlier this year, maybe one weekend later the next year. And understanding that, we've blocked off some dates to make sure that we reserve a calendar slot so we can fulfill that obligation. However, there may be an opportunity, since we've overlapped, to have another request come in. And so basically this establishes a protocol that would give the mayor the ability to assign those dates and establish that process. So he would then indicate which color and which date for which event, and it basically puts the ball in that court so we understand which direction we're going. Those are the three major policy updates, and essentially all that I want to show, this was in the packet of information, I just put it here so it's easier to discuss, is this calendar of events. You can see I'll just breeze through these. What you'll see in the docket there is just basically highlights what our staff is recommending as recurring events. And then one thing that I'll do is we'll be bringing this back each year to reestablish these as we continue to grow these events. We'll be bringing it back each year and formalizing which events we're going to endorse throughout the calendar year and put it in you guys' hands to make those decisions of which events stay or which events do not. And I'll breeze through these. You can just see they're color-coded. They indicate which ones they are. For example, Red for Women, American Heart Month there in February, and you can see some overlapping events. And I won't spend a lot of time. These are in the packet. Just going through, we've established these and allocated these throughout the 12-month calendar. And you can see, I mentioned Winston-Salem State, so I'll briefly indicate October seems to be a big month for us, but you can understand here that there's some overlapping events here. This is the one that we would then be looking to the mayor's office for some guidance on when to program these for which color. Here we have significant time allocated for domestic violence awareness, as well as the Winston-Salem State Homecoming. And then there's a couple others that you see in there as far as the pink and blue for pregnancy and infant loss remembrance that we have then been doing recurring throughout the past few years. But again, this provides the flexibility to be able to pick and choose those depending on when certain events may come in. And so I'll briefly just try to wrap these up. Lastly, I want to just mention this list. So I mentioned the annual events. Everything listed on the top of this area right in here, these are the annual events that are referenced in the calendar. Basically, these are recurring events we've identified on a yearly basis that have been approved. So what we'd like to do is basically formalize these through this calendar. That was what we would then approve for a calendar installation. And then some various, just to give an understanding, we often have these what we call one-off events that may not be every year thing, but there are certain requests that we've had, and we've just listed some of those that we've screened and we have had approved there at the bottom. Miscellaneous events such as the Salem College graduation and different things for cheers or the Light It Blue initiative. So just essentially a lot of different one-off type events that we can then have screened, and then the mayor's office can certainly approve those. And then lastly, just some of notice some of the quality and really what it looks like all lit up. I'll just briefly run through these. We're really proud of this architectural features and what we can implement there. Again, the arches over 52, we have both the pedestrian bridges, and it's just a really good amenity that Winston-Salem DOT does manage and handle. So again, what this does essentially establishes a process that we can bring back on a yearly basis that basically establishes a calendar of events and then provides the authority to dictate any overlapping events and reestablishes that protocol. So I'm happy to take any questions. I appreciate your time.
Jeff, thank you. Thank you for a very clear and thorough presentation. Councilmember Scipio.
I would like for you to consider adding the Black Theater Festival every other year to the calendar, and perhaps River Run Theater Festival. It looks like a great thing to do, and perhaps Over the Arches over 52, opening day of Bowman Gray Racings. So many people come then. So I think when we celebrate those things that bring folks to town, it'd be great to add them into the calendar.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Councilmember Scipio. And this is a growing scale, and we anticipate, given that we're hopefully coming out of the COVID, that we establish more clear events and make this calendar something that is consistent.
So your department manages all the lighting of this?
That is correct. We screen these, and they would fill out the online application through our website, ultimately just help the applicant through that process, and we send it to the mayor's office for consideration.
Other questions? Councilmember Larson.
Where is the light switch?
Right here.
Who actually turns the switch that makes these?
Winston-Salem DOT staff, we actually go out on site, there's control panels, and we program them there and implement whatever color has been selected.
Union Station, is that where that's located?
Actually, these are control panels that are in proximity to the infrastructure that's in the field, so we actually go to the site, open the control panel on site.
Go out to the bridge themselves?
Yes, sir.
Or the arch themselves? Good job. Thank you.
Councilmember Burke. Is the list of colors that's on our table here, is that the limit of what is available, or is sky the limit?
We have some guidance in our architectural lighting policy, which basically has some guidance on which colors don't apply, but they are, it's an RGB LED type scenario, so red, green, blue, and you can, all the combinations, so it's quite a few.
Right. Somebody texted me that, Juneteenth is probably a good opportunity. I have a feeling there'll be a large list, and that's one of the reasons why we need to do this, is to ask the public and council members what's important to them. So this is an excellent way to reach out and get those suggestions. So the list will be coming in, I'm sure. All right. Once again, thank you very much. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing nothing, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.